What if the hemispheres of two different people were swapped? That's a puzzle that has been asked. Meaning, in the brain, in the skull, there are two halves typically, normatively. What if one such half was put into the skull of this person, right, from this person, and the other half was put into the skull of this person? It's really a gruesome thought experiment, and better to not think of it, but for the sake of argument, or to perhaps gain some insights concerning questions about human individuality, consciousness, whatever the case might be, it still could be worth considering. So, a completely kind of a thoughtless answer could go something as follows. I am my brain, therefore, if half of my brain is put into somebody else's skull, that person will be half of me and half of themselves. However, with a little bit of thought, that doesn't make sense. So, for one, there are people that get half of their hemisphere completely removed. They do not become half of a person. There's a condition called hydrocephalus, water on the brain, where up to perhaps 95, if not a little bit more percent of the brain tissue is eaten up. And at times there is disability involved indeed and loss of function, but especially if it happens early enough, sometimes function is preserved. And there's a well documented case of an individual graduating college with an above average IQ who had approximately 95% of his brain tissue missing. Further, there are babies born with very little brain tissue, and it can grow back, and then function can redistribute across the brain if there's brain damage early enough. For example, perhaps linguistic function was localized in the right hemisphere according to, or correlated with activity in the right hemisphere according to scans at a young age. And then, may we be spared, there's some kind of damage in the right hemisphere or it's removed, and that same activity can then be apprehended in the left hemisphere or vice versa. Whatever the case might be. So to say simply, I am my brain, and if you take half of my brain away, there's half of me, and if you put it into somebody else's skull, there's half of me in that person combined with their other half, is absurd. So what's a more sophisticated way to perhaps approach this question? One starting point would be to consider direct first person, as it's called, experience. My first person point of view. How can that be described? Well, that description perhaps is predicated on the degree of development and integration that I have sustained. At lower such phases of development, what it's like to be me is not necessarily felt as coherent and consistent. It may be that I feel a different type of way every few moments or every few hours, that I simply experience emotions and thoughts, and I feel at one with them while they are active. So, for instance, right now I am anger, and then I am joy, and then I am sadness, and so forth. I am anxiety, I am depression. However, at higher stages of integration and development, it would seem that individuals develop a coherent, consistent sense of self, such as is not one and the same with emotions and thoughts and so forth. Right? I'm aware of my anxiety and of my sadness, but I'm not synonymous with them. I have intrusive thoughts. I don't like these thoughts, but it doesn't mean that I am my thoughts and such. So, how I experience myself varies depending on whether I'm a little kid or I'm an adult. Am I an immature adult? Am I a mature adult? And so forth. However, it does seem sound to say that it's always a first person point of view. And there's just something at the forefront of that attention, of my attention. For example, a hand or a tree. And also that the entirety of my first person point of view is, we can use the term conditioned, meaning it's not absolute. It's individual. It varies. And I can again think back to, let's say that I'm a mature adult, and I can think back to when I was, an immature adult, and the whole of my world, the whole of my first person point of view was different, profoundly. Right? And I can then think back to when I was a child. My whole existence was different fundamentally. So it's a first person point of view. It seems to be indivisible or undividable, however we say it. And yet it is individual. It is conditioned. It's not some sort of absolute vantage point, nor some sort of purified, quote unquote, consciousness or what have we. It's the experience of personhood or its potentiality before integration and such is achieved. Now, this experience, the first person point of view, can be had without any knowledge in principle, without any experiences such as would be classified as that of one's body. Meaning, if I'm sighted, I can see a body that I call my own. I might even be able to smell it, and so forth. I can touch it. But that's not necessary. The blind from birth are also people, right? Even if I've never seen, needless to say, obviously, even if I've never seen my body, that doesn't make me any less of a person. Even if I smell very good or don't smell at all, I've never smelt my body, doesn't make me any less of a person. Even if I have some sort of condition where I cannot feel touch sensations in connection with my body, or even say I can't feel a stomach ache or I can't feel food, none of that. That doesn't make me any less of a person. Of course, that could present problems for developing fully if initially I can't see and I can't hear. Right? Then other steps may have to be taken. For example, with the well-known Helen Keller, right? You have to learn language through touch and such. Right? But we see, as with Helen Keller, that the little bit of cleverness, even somebody who cannot see and who cannot hear, can still reach great heights of humanity and mental and moral development. So certainly, just because I have no sensory knowledge of my body doesn't mean that I am not a person, for those of us, or should that be the case, and when it is the case. So then we need to take a second step and ask ourselves, which perceptual experiences of mine seem to be or to stand in some sort of immediate connection with that first person point of view, with what I feel and with what I think, and with the choices that I make and such. In here, we would go by some sort of correlation. So, for example, let's say that I was in a setup such that I had a thought and some kind of robotic arm moved. In fact, that seems to be possible and very doable nowadays. I would say that the motion of that robotic arm, indeed, even if it is thousands of miles away from me, that is indicative of my own inner experience, of my own first person self activity. Let's say that I light up a screen, right, such as a video chat. And I say that this screen, what is shown on it, is in light of me. It's an appearance of me because, say, I smile, and it shows that on the screen. I say something, and it's transmitted to the other person on the video chat. So then this screen is indicative of me. Beyond these examples, normatively, we look at, for example, our hands, and we see, oh, well, I want to move. Let me think the thought, move my hand, and then I can do it. I have a feeling right now. I feel happy. I don't have to smile. Smiling is not happiness, but I can smile. I can indicate the happiness, even if just to myself. I feel frustrated. I can hold it in. I feel sad. I perhaps can withstand crying or frowning or anything like that, but I can also give signs of my sadness, or they can happen whether or not I agree or not. And I'm crying despite myself, and so forth. We're basically trying to figure out which perceptual experiences are had in light of that direct first person point of view, such as is me. Right? But the two are not intrinsically synonymous. The robotic arm is not synonymous with me, even if it follows my instructions. The screen for video chatting is not synonymous, and the images that it shows is not synonymous with me. A photograph of me is not me. Otherwise, if you take a million photographs of me, there's a million me's, but there's not. Right? So we try to figure out, we try to do some detective work, which aspects of my experience are in light of who I am. And sometimes it can be a little bit tricky. For example, let's say that I'm a conjoined twin. Right? And we perhaps can both control an arm. So then the question is, which arm follows my instructions? Right? Which part of the body is in light of what I want to do? I want to go right, and my conjoined twin wants to go left. Well, let's see how the body responds. We don't know the immediate connection at the deepest level between that self-activity, between volition, and what the body does. Right? Imagine trying to coordinate everything that physiologists, say goes on concerning the anatomy, the nerves, the blood, all that. Let me think. I have to move my hand, do these millions of operations. No, it's just that I want to move my hand, and then hopefully it happens, if it does happen. Right? So just so here, if I'm a conjoined twin, I just need to try something and try to figure out which part of the body is whose and so forth. Do a little detective work, basically. So far, we have these two aspects here. One is the first person point of view. Two is what sensory experiences concerned with bodies correlate with that first person point of view. So now to try to use these two categories, if we will, as it concerns the first question, what happens if we swap hemispheres? Take again, two hemispheres in one person, two in another. One goes here and one goes here. What do we have then? So, trying to remain disciplined and avoiding just imagination. Again, it's going to be half of a person and this and that. Perhaps something such can be said. I will always remain as a first person point of view. That's all that I can be. Long as I exist in any way, shape, or form, I'm only going to be me. I'm only going to be I, the first person I. Now, what I experience by way of that first person I can vary in light of a multitude of factors. It can vary in light of, say, heat. I'm in a sauna, I feel very hot. Cold, I'm in the snow, I feel very cold. It can vary in light of what I ate. It can vary in light of what I drank. It can vary in light of all sorts of substances, such as appear to affect cognition, the ability to think, perceptual possibilities, and such. Something as hopefully benign and widespread as coffee, and going onward from there. So if half of my hemisphere were removed, just like if other parts of my nervous system were affected, that can and perhaps will have some effects concerning what I perceive and my abilities to think and my abilities to speak and so forth. Again, there are cases of people functioning perfectly fine with one hemisphere. There's cases of people functioning perfectly fine with severe hydrocephalus, again, that water on the brain, where most of the brain is missing. But oftentimes when a part of the brain is messed with, there's going to be some changes to what I can and can't do and what I experience. For example, I might lose, may we be spared, the ability to speak. There might be different sensational tricks. I can see something, but I can't name it. I can't see colors, whatever the case might be. So my experience can certainly modify, but it will still be me from the first person point of view. It will be an individualized vantage point, such as, again, in and of its own self cannot be divided. So then, if another, let's say half then of my hemisphere is removed and another person's hemisphere is put into my skull, from my own experience, again, it just depends. That's an empirical question. What will I experience differently? It's not inconceivable that certain certain attributes or aspects associated with some other person may influence me, right? If somebody else's body part is organically kind of incorporated into the rest of my organism. Saying something such as that, oh, I'm going to have somebody else's memories, those kinds of hypotheses are reliant on views concerning the role of the brain that are not proven, to say the least. Those are questions, how memories are stored. So it's probably not prudent to go as far as to say that I could or would have somebody else's memories or anything like that, just that my function can be affected. Realistically speaking, it's unlikely that two hemispheres could be reconnected or what have we. So it would probably be to the effect of just losing a hemisphere. And the same would go from a different eye, from a different first person vantage point, that being from my own perspective of the other person. Now, with that said, the second question would be, how do I figure out who is who? And that also is an empirical question. It's how I would figure out that question anyways. All right, let's say that somebody has multiple personality disorder, and I have to figure out who am I speaking with now. Is it the little child or is it the adult? Who am I speaking with? If a person has severe, multiple personality disorder, well, I have to speak to them and I have to try to figure it out. Even without such disorders, within a certain normative range, people vary drastically concerning the face that they show to the world. Am I speaking to the calm, rational version of my friend, or the aggravated, a little bit nutty perhaps version of my friend? I speak with them and I try to find out. I try to infer what, again, perceptual experiences of mind stand for what, persons included. Again, I'm looking at a screen. Oh, and that's the video chat of my friend. The screen is not itself my friend, but it's indicative to me of my friend. Somebody has, again, just a thought experiment, is a robotic arm. I don't know who it belongs to, but it's doing stuff. It's writing stuff. And maybe the person that's controlling it is thousands of miles away. But if I can figure out who is controlling it, then I can say, oh, well, this robotic arm is controlled by so and so somewhere. In fact, in computer games, there's all kinds of characters. I'm trying to figure out maybe this character is being controlled by my buddy. This character is being controlled by somebody I don't know. Right? So I'm just trying to figure out which of my perceptual experiences stand for what. So here, somebody else could try to figure out who is who, and generally we do that by considering the entirety of the anatomy. Right? The anatomy would be considered to be the visibility of an individuality, and as long as enough of it remains to where the person is alive, we say that that is the sign for the given person. So again, there is Joe, right? And I don't know how many hemispheres he has. Perhaps one was removed when he was born. Perhaps again he has hydrocephalus. Perhaps in this thought experiment he has somebody else's hemisphere or a hemisphere from somebody else's body. Who knows? But the entirety of that anatomy generally for me stands for Joe. And I would need reason to think otherwise. So, for example, when a person passes, hopefully after 120, but not always, then we say it's no longer the person, him or herself, it's his or her body. Now the body stands for something else, just like that it can be. It's no longer, oh, that is Joe, or whoever. It was Joe. It's the body of Joe. But while we're alive, we say, oh, that's Joe, that's Jill, whoever the case might be. And by speaking with them and trying to figure out what's going on in their mental and emotional life, we can gain a clearer picture of the individuality at hand. So that is one interpretation of what would occur in the gruesome thought experiment, which hopefully never will be attempted, of switching up hemispheres from two different people. Perhaps it could be simplified by saying what would happen if I lost half a hemisphere. Perhaps I would lose some function. Perhaps next to nothing would happen. But I always would remain myself. I'm not synonymous with my brain or any other body part. However, my body stands as a sign for my individual, all-encompassing first-person point of view. From my own point of view, I remain myself. If somebody else is trying to figure out where am I, they need to do some detective work. First of all, am I alive? Am I awake? What's going on mentally for me? And so forth. So we can think about it. Thank you for listening.